Polis, 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, and Taming Gaming. This is Staying In.
Right, gentlemen. I'm going to give you your note. I'm going to go for the note that my dishwasher is currently vibrating at, so it will seamlessly blend into the recording. So, that might be a bit high.
I think, has anyone else just had the playing music notification come up on their Zoom?
No, actually, mine wasn't tuneful enough, but me doing an impression of a car horn was. By the way, that's all been fixed. Staying in, fans.
Has it?
Yeah.
You sorted now?
600 quid.
I'm sure the neighbours are happy.
Yeah. Thanks.
No, Pete, it's still going on. It's just now in ultrasound.
Okay, so happy birthday. That might be too loud. Happy. Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Everyone round the room. Here we go. Happy birthday to you.
Goodness. Oh, this is going to sound good.
This is
birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Daniel. I'll harmonise. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
My favourite thing about the and many more is it is pitched in a way as if you're lucky.
Yeah, I know.
There might be a few more of these, if you're lucky. Dan, how did you celebrate?
Well, I woke up in the morning with the birds kind of tweeting outside my window. I left the house. I kind of skipped down the road. I enjoyed all the wonderful things you can do out and about in the wonderful world. I went to lots of parties and restaurants and pubs, did lots of lovely things. And then I remembered I can't do any of those things. And so I walked back inside. Sat on my sofa and had a nice relaxing day. Fortunately, one of my children still had to go to nursery, which meant we didn't have to look after him during the day, so it could be a bit more relaxed than it would have been had I had two children in the house. But yeah, I just kind of relaxed all day. We had plans to do like certain things or like play games, stuff like that, but we ended up just, me and my wife, just relaxing for the entire day and had a lovely time.
Well, that sounds nice. It
was actually nice. As nice as it is always to do something special on a birthday. Unfortunately, circumstances dictated that was not possible. But even so, it wasn't the worst thing in the world to just have a nice, relaxing day with kind of at home with my wife, who's still on maternity leave, my 5-month-old daughter, and then later on, first thing in the morning with my 3-year-old boy, and later on in the evening with my 3-year-old boy. So we all did have lots of fun. He was very excited about opening presents because I had quite a few presents to open up first thing in the morning. And he's lovely that he gets very, very excited about any presents. They don't have to be for him. He doesn't get jealous or anything. He's just so excited that someone is getting presents. That's good. So he constantly wants to bring me the presents and open them with me, and then he'll move on. He doesn't care that they're not for him. I got some lovely presents. I've got some nice items of clothing. I got some books. I got some nice gadgets. One of the gadgets I got because I'm trying to do my exercise, but I can't go running at the moment. So I got a smart skipping rope.
What?
Yep, they do these now. A smart skipping rope, which will link to an app on your phone and will record how many rotations of skipping you do. So you can set yourself challenges and kind of compete against yourself. So yeah, that works. I actually tried it and that works. I also realised I don't know how to skip. And skipping is much harder than I thought it was.
Here's my question to you, Dan. Do you do skipping like a boxer does skipping, like in one place, jumping up and down, trying to essentially like that? Or do you do skipping like down the road, like yay? That's what I would do.
Or do you get people to hold either end of the skipping rope and they sing a song as you like?
I'm off
jump
to Jenny's house.
I was doing the exercise version of skipping, which is where you skip in one spot and you just kind of jump up and down. You don't kind of jump through the kind of the rope as it comes around.
You don't. Traditionally, you don't lose any calories doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dan, is this wireless?
This is all wireless, other than the wire. But yeah, so I got that. I also got some very, very, very lovely presents from you fine gentlemen.
Oh.
This is where Pete goes, of course I know what these are.
Of course I know what they are.
So I got a game for my PS5. You kindly bought me Spider-Man Miles Morales, which will be kind of the first proper PS5 game I will play. The only proper kind of official PS5 game I've played is Astro's Playroom, which I loved, but it is just kind of a built-in demo, so I'm really looking forward to playing that. And you also, I believe we've spoken about this previously on the podcast, and I was very excited to receive this gift the day before, was a box from a company and a restaurant near and dear to Sam's heart, because it's near his neck of the woods, called Rudy's Pizzeria, and they deliver kind of homemade stone-baked pizzas, which you can just pop in the oven for kind of about 20 minutes, and I have to say they are some of the best pizzas I have had in a long time. And if there's one food that I feel like I can kind of judge,
you're a connoisseur.
It's pizza. That's kind of my food of choice, and they were absolutely superb. So thank you very much to all of you for sending me them.
So we are as time of recording, we're currently in a lockdown, which means on the weekends I have tons of alone time. But something about lockdown, it's made me hyper aware of what I like to call Kris's consumption to creativity ratio. And it's how essentially I'm hyper aware of how much I consume content.
All right, I was thinking food. All right, okay.
That goes without saying.
I was thinking consumption as in, like, the thing that you used to get locked away into a sanitarium with in the 19th century.
Oh, he's got the consumption. Sorry.
Oh, he's got consumption. He's not got enough creativity. He's got way too much consumption.
The catch-all term for we don't know what this is.
We don't know what this is. Look, it's the 19th century. We don't know what's going on.
It's an umbrella term.
Have you ever watched? It was an excellent. I think it was a HBO series. It was called The Nicker.
The Nick.
The Nick.
With Clive Owen.
With Clive Owen. It was a drama series set in a hospital just after the First World War. One of the ones. And it's incredible because it's set just at the time where like medicine sort of tips over in becoming like a spurious like type of magic and alchemy into actual science. So they're just like figuring out that, people have different types of blood, so that's why blood transfusions don't go well, and they're figuring out like maybe we should wash our hands before surgery, that kind of thing. And there's a bit in it where, because obviously it's an American hospital, the Knickerbocker, and there's this guy comes around and he's pitching this new equipment that he's got. He's got, I've got this machine that will let you see inside people. And they're like, oh my god, that's crazy. And he goes, yeah, just like, and he shows up what we now know of as an X-ray, and all the nurses are like gaggling around this salesman and just like, oh, I want to go, do it to my head. And he plonks her down into a chair and goes, right, sit there for an hour. And obviously we now know that X-rays are potentially probably not best to be pointed at a head for an hour.
No,
for an hour.
Isn't that how Dr. Manhattan was created in Watchmen? So I'm glad you clarified, Pete, because you're absolutely right. I should clarify it. When I'm talking about consumption, I'm talking about content that I absorb, other people's creative work. So that could be Disney Plus, like we're getting towards the end of WandaVision, for example, which I am consuming. It could be novels, that kind of stuff.
Great.
And I'm hyper aware of the fact that how often sometimes I'm binging other people's creativity, but I'm not creating anything myself.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to get that balance down between those two things, really. So I am kind of drawing, I'm making stuff. I've got my own kind of creative projects, whether it be kind of artwork or kind of stuff I'm writing at the moment. But I found something that actually was a gift that Sam got me as part of our Secret Santa this year, which has got that sweet spot slapped down the middle. Imagine that Venn diagram of creativity and consumption, not that kind, this kind, and they overlap. And right at the centre of that nexus point is this game that is 1,000-year-old vampire.
Ooh.
From 2019, from Tim Hutchings. It's a solo role-playing game, which is what I asked for Christmas, and Santa very kindly bought it for me.
He did.
In the guise of Sam.
Ho, ho, ho.
And I'm on a bit of a kind of a craze with these at the moment, these solo RPGs. Sam and I backed The Wretched on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I started playing that recently, and I actually freaked myself out during a lunch break playing it, because it's like this, essentially it's like this solo sci-fi horror RPG that you play. And the idea is that you are the last member of this crew left on this ship called the Wretched, and you've got to try and find some way to send a signal out to be rescued. But there might also be something in the ship that's stalking you. And how the game works, the mechanics work, is that you're meant to have what the manual loving describes, a tumble tower. So a bit like Dread is the tumble tower, the Jenga tower, is meant to represent the state of your ship. So if at any point you're asked to take a pull from the tower and it falls, your ship collapses. And then the rest of the game is done by a pack of playing cards. So basically you draw from the deck, and depending on what the suit is and what the number is, you perform certain actions. Like in the ship, you'll go and fix something, or you'll notice a rifle being held by one of your dead colleagues, and it will ask you like a question about like how you feel about that, how did you fix this kind of stuff. And the prompts are incredibly creative and driven to really like get you to start inhabiting this role. And I decided for some reason to listen to the It Follows soundtrack by Disaster
such a good score.
And I really started, like, there was this bit where I flipped over a card. It's like, you hear a noise and see marks in the walls. And I was like, oh, God. Yeah, The Wretched is really, really good. I really freaked myself out playing it, but it was great.
But what Sam says there is, for me, the quintessential draw and lure of these kind of experiences, because a solo RPG is essentially like, it's a role-playing game, but you are kind of working with a kind of a piece of text which acts as a series of prompts that can ask interesting questions that are kind of prompting you into thinking about character creation, development, making difficult choices, and that's what you have here. So if The Wretched is about being the last survivor on this ship where something might be stalking you, in 1,000-year-old vampire, it's kind of in the title, you chronicle, and as the game accounts for it, the unlife of a vampire of your own creation, from beginning all the way to what I assume will be the end over this kind of long period of time. Because I'm still playing it, I should say. Mm-hmm. And what I love about it in particular is it's a lovely kind of, if you buy the physical version of it, it's this beautiful, looks like this wonderful kind of ex-library book. Yeah. With these kind of immaculate, kind of beautiful kind of drawings in it. And you feel like you're part of a mythos before you even put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, say, for example. And you are keeping a journal of your experiences of being a vampire. You have a 10-sided dice, a D10, a 6-sided dice, a D6. You roll the two of them. You deduct the results of the D6 from the D10, and that tells you how far ahead or how far back you go through the prompts. And it asks these really interesting questions. And to start off with, as your character is just developing, all they have is a few set of skills, some resources, some kind of mortal characters around them, a mark, and a few memories. But after a while, as this starts to grow and build, the choices become harder for you to try and answer because you're aware of the repercussions of them. And it may sound like it's becoming quite a big, unwieldy thing, but it's got this wonderful little element of it that allows you to kind of pick up and play it. And that's this idea of the memories, because obviously you are a character that is living for a prolonged period of time. You cannot remember everything. So you actually have a memory quota. And you can have a diary which you can kind of jettison some of those memories off into, which I don't tend to use that much. I'm quite liking the idea of using my character. But it means then that actually, if you've met your quota and you're asked to put in another memory in, you've got to choose, okay, which memory do I lose? Mm-hmm. And in some instances, that prompt will say, look, you need to lose a memory now, or you need to lose a character that's close to you. Or you wake up and like a long time has passed. All living characters are now removed from your memory.
Yeah, you've slept in for 200 years, like...
And so, like, and these kind of questions are really interesting. Like, I played it today, and I had the prompt, which was, a character you victimized comes to you in a dream. Do they curse or forgive you? And that is 2 sentences, 1 question. But I was pondering that for quite a long time. And I know some people play this game with, they have a nice little notebook they have specially for it. I use a Word document because, for me, at the moment... that idea of redacting, I'm not deleting the memories, I'm actually shading them out, I'm redacting them because I'm putting them all in this higgledy-piggledy way, and I'm looking forward to later on, this is me personally, unredacting everything and just seeing just this entire person's life, all their, all the stuff they've forgotten, including their own name at times, poured out onto paper.
I think the interesting thing about all of these solo RPGs, especially the sort of like, I would say, to be clear, like the sort of journaling ones, like the creative focused ones, because I know there are people who try and play role-playing games, like traditional role-playing games, solo by using something like, I think it's called Mythic or something like that.
It's Four Against Darkness is the one that I've played.
Okay, so there's stuff like that, but there's also like ways of playing like Dungeons and Dragons 5e with essentially like a virtual games master that has a book and a table and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've never kind of seen the appeal of that specifically. I think the really cool thing about these is, I think I've said this before on the podcast, but like one of the things I find most terrifying is like a blank piece of paper and an infinite number of things I can do. Like, because immediately I'm just like, well, I have no idea what I want to do next. Whereas with these journaling RPGs, like, if somebody turned around to you, Kris, and said, like, you need to make a story about a vampire and this is what they do, and a huge amount of information about what their life is, that's actually quite a daunting thing to do. Whereas when you get all these prompts, it fires off the... it fires off the brain and the creative part of the brain in lots and lots of different directions, which I find kind of like freeing, weirdly constricting by being freeing. You know what I mean?
But it's really interesting because going back to my original point about this sweet spot between creativity and consumption, not that one, this one.
Yeah. This
idea that I look forward to it in the same way that I'm looking forward to catching up on my latest episode or something, even though I'm kind of waiting on myself to be the one that writes it. So it's really interesting that I can kind of have my cake and eat it, really. I'm able to enjoy the process as an audience member, looking forward to where this series will go, this book will go, but equally also as a creator, feeling like I've accomplished something and I've done something that is unique to anyone else playing the game. Because I know, Sam, you also own the game as well now.
I do.
Like, even though Sam and I may touch upon some of the same prompts, because you're rolling the dice, it means that Sam and I will encounter them all in a different order. And here's what's really lovely as well, and I think one of the reasons why is this genius. There are 80 prompts in the book, but as some listeners may have realised, if you're rolling the dice, there's a good chance you may end up going back to a number you've already been to. Well, what's clever about that is that each number, pretty much, most of the numbers has 3 prompts within it. So if I just do a little tick and pencil to say I've done this one, so I end up going back to that number, I just do the next one below it. And there's something about revisiting that. You get that sense of a chronology of moving forward, but also this is about memory. So at times, this vampire is going to reflect back on previous stuff that has kind of niggled away at them. And it just feels really lovely. It feels quite sad. It's quite moving at times. And it's not that... There are some elements of the macabre and the creepiness of it, but it's very much Bram Stoker's Dracula rather than Gatiss and Moffat's Dracula, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the kind of... And I'm really glad because initially when I got this, I'm thinking, generally in the vampire narratives, I tend to prefer be on the side of the vampire slayer. But this process... I can kind of decide what kind of vampire I want to be. And that's been really lovely. It's actually made me have a newfound appreciation for this type of character. So you don't have to be totally invested and wedded to the kind of vampire mythos, really. You can just have a passing interest. It's as much a story about loss, memory, regrets, and the people you meet in life and those kinds of encounters and the values of those kind of encounters than it is about, you know, sucking blood.
The manual is exceptional. Like, it's one of the best, like, gaming RPG
definitely.
manuals I've ever read. Like, the amount of support it gives you and the creative license it gives you is really good. So when it talks about resources, like, it says this can be anything from a bank to a sailing ship to a book, and then it asks you to pick someone who's undead, who's immortal. So you get 3 mortals and 1 immortal, and that immortal makes you into a vampire, and that kind of basically kicks the whole process off. So that's how it starts. But it's up to you when you want to start. That's where you want to start that setting, who that person is as a character to begin with, and who, like, their family members, and like what they start off as before they turn into a vampire. When you create an RPG character, you don't really know what character they are until you actually encounter something that helps define them as a character. Right. So you can write all the backstory you want, but until they actually, like, face up against a monster or face up against a decision, that's when, like, the things that make them who they are, just like you as a human being, coalesce, and suddenly you find out what the real you is. The reason 1,000 Year Vampire works is that you're immediately you spend all this time making a character, and it's not like you're wandering around for days and then suddenly you finally find, like, this big adventure or this big decision you got to make. The first thing that happens to you as a character is you're now a vampire. How do you feel about this? So it's just like, well, I better... that makes it very, very easy to find what my character is.
There isn't that chapter in Bram Stoker's Dracula where he's just on the toilet. You know, you know, when you're writing a play, like, when you're writing any kind of narrative, it's about, okay, this is the life of this character. Which bits do I want to draw attention to? Yeah. And in lots of kind of Greek tragedies in particular, you'd have what's called the late point of attack, where the play begins after a main event has already happened.
Yeah, sure, right.
That's the key. That's the key always for me, is like, the best dramas are funny and you encounter it after the event has happened. Like, that makes, like, the best dramas and the best characters.
There's I think the other bit of beauty that solo RPGs tend to have in that way is that you're not bound by what everybody else is doing or what the GM is running. So one of the things that one of the reasons that we ran Basic Fantasy by just saying, like, I just want a single line of backstory because it doesn't matter, right? Like right now, is because I didn't want to do what's called, which is something that is increasingly popular, which is something called a session zero. So session zeros they're where usually, I mean, quite often groups of, like, strangers who have got together to play an RPG online or you know, in a friendly local game store, that kind of thing. They will actually sit down and figure out who their characters are as a group, because one of the other issues with coming up with characters separately before a thing begins is, you know, I did this when I played an RPG with a different group years and years and years ago.
Whoa.
No, I'm sorry. No, let's skip over that. You
play games with other people.
I know. I'm using this forum to tell you now. I wrote this amazingly long backstory about this character who, you know, I can't even remember what it was. It was like they went to sea and they saw this and they had a, you know,
in a beautiful pea green boat.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, you know, they had a great family, but then there was a tragedy and all this sort of stuff, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then, like, we started the thing, and none of that. There's no way to bring any of that up in the story that was being told. So it was like, oh. Right, like, it was pointless. Like, imagine if you were, like, watching a movie, and, like, they just spent an hour of, like, okay, here's all of the things that happened in this person's life. Anyway, that doesn't really matter, because, you know, Then they find a transforming robot in a junkyard. Like, you know, it really, you know, that was the first movie that came to mind. By the way, I couldn't think of any other.
Bumblebee or Transformers.
I thought, what is the best narrative that I know? And I was like, Transformers.
Someone on Twitter said that I should try. Stevie is typing ... at games 247 probably. Said that this is off the back of me talking about me playing the Wretched, and they recommended Gentleman Bandit, which is all these games. I think I know the Wretched is 1,000-Year-Old Vampire is. They're all on itch.io.
Yeah.
Very reasonable prices. Gentleman Bandit was like £7. Probably a bit less actually, because it was $7. And it's a solo poem writing game. And essentially what it is it works in the same way that the Wretched does, is that you play as a gentleman bandit in the Old West. And you're writing a 13-line poem. So a bit like the Wretched, you're drawing cards from a deck in order to get the prompts for what you need. And so the suit of the deck gives you like what they call like a motif. So loss, love, freedom, and fear. Then the number of the card gives you what they call like a matter. So, for example, an ace is what drives you, or 5 is what is your darkest truth. And basically you do each line that way. So you draw 13 cards, and each line has a motif and is constituted of something to do with that matter. And then you write 13 lines, and that's it. You just create a little poem for yourself based on a character that you just create on the spot.
That's lovely.
Isn't that gorgeous? And it's its own really self-contained thing. And there's something I quite like, and it goes back to what Dan was saying before about the less is more. There's so much held within those 13 lines.
The weirdest thing to happen to me was that I went to bed with a rule book for 3 nights in a row. But that's I don't know if that's unusual, or
is this for a board game, or
yes,
okay,
not my how to use a Makita version 3 hammer screwdriver.
Why are you going to why are you taking it to bed for so many nights?
I took it as a personal challenge when Kosmos got in touch with me and said, would you like us to send you the game Polis?
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing here, when they said something along the lines of, we didn't think you would like it because it might be too heavy. And I took that as a personal challenge.
Do they just think that you're sort of like slightly weak-armed? Is that what it is? They're just like, oh no, he shouldn't go into the post office and pick that up. You won't be able to carry it.
Well, when it arrived, it is absolutely gargantuan. It's huge. It's the biggest. It's definitely the heaviest box I own. It's bigger than Jaws of the Lion. If you go to our Instagram page, you'll see me unboxing that on my table.
Sam, I'm looking at pictures of this on BGG, and I am upset with you. Like, this is
why?
Because this is a heavy looking game. This looks like a crunchy ass game. Like I was like, Polis surely can't refer to the essentially the Greek word for the people, the voting people.
No, it means the city.
But the polis is everything that makes up the voting population, I believe.
Well, I just did a Greek to English translation for polis, and it came up with city. So,
isn't it lovely when you know exactly what's going to get cut?
Yeah, it is good, isn't it? It is good. Yeah, you know exactly what it's going to be. All right, well, I'm going to double check that at some point. But this looks heavy. This is like lots of cubes and a big old looking rule book and a map of Greece and neighbouring islands. And why did they send this to you and not to me?
Oh, there we get to the crux of it. All day jealousy.
This is what he's really worrying about.
He took the long road round, but he finally got to his destination.
Well, taking the long road round, funny enough, Dan, is part of
Polis's strategy. Well, this, to be fair, after me and Kris had finished playing this, you, Pete, was the first person that sprang to mind in terms of like, I would really love to sit him down and introduce this game to him, because it's... we've all played Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's basically like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Let's do the politics.
Cool. Cool. I'm on board. I'm on board.
It's actually running the civilization that fueled the central war that appears in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So it's a 2-player. Now it's kind of called like a war game. Like the guy from Devere in the video that I watched says it's a war game, but I disagree. I think it's more like almost like a civilization game, because it's strictly 2 players. So one player plays as the Greeks, the other player plays as the Spartans, and you are in charge of running that civilization whilst they are at war with each other. So you are responsible for feeding a population. You're responsible for making sure that your armies are well supplied. You're responsible for making sure that there are market routes for you to use around the islands and the Greece and the neighbouring isles. You're responsible for making sure that your armies are in the right place to defend areas and poli that you control. And yeah, so it's not really a war game, and it is more of like a civilization style game. Like as the 2 players, the Greeks and the Spartans, you are controlling the civilizations whilst they are at war. So you're responsible for the populations of the cities that you conquered. You're responsible for making sure that there are market lines open so your traders can sell all the goods and the resources that you're growing. You're making sure that your armies are properly stocked, that you've got enough boats in the oceans to defend yourself from attack. Like, all of this stuff is going on, and that's what makes it a very heady and heavy experience. That every single thing you do in this game has a consequence, and that is what makes it superb. And I think I loved every second that I played of it. It's actually for a very for what on the outset looks like a very complex and heavy game, it actually does play quite simply on your go. All you can do is 2 actions. Admittedly, you've got a list of 11 to pick from, but, by the by. And then the other player takes 2 actions, and you take 2, and they take 2, and it continues until one of you passes, and you do that 3 times, basically, and that is the game. The other thing that makes this game such a wonderful thing to play is it's actually a reprint. So I think this originally came out in 2013, and it's by a designer called Fran Diaz, who, at the time of recording, Polis is the highest rated board game on BGG by a Spanish author. So already it's exceedingly highly regarded, and people were like calling for a reprint for ages. So Devere took it up to do it, and luckily they put in a lot of effort in terms of like refining actually what the game was. It wasn't just like a straight reprint and we'll make things look a bit flashier or we'll make the wood a bit nicer. They actually rewrote the rule book. They took away 1 resource from the game, and they also took away 1 round. It used to be a 4-round game, which is about 4 hours. So they like streamlined a lot of the experience. And also, and this is really adorable, in the video that I watched, they also defined it as cat proof. So as Pete rightly said, like, most of the game is defined by these little cubes that you have. And being a civilization style game, it's basically resource management. You can only do what you have the resources to do in terms of your city. You can only make a soldier if you've got the iron to make the armor for them. You can only build a boat if you've got the wood to craft the boat from. So, but all of these wooden cubes now sit in, rather than on a sheet, which is what it was previously, they now sit in all these like indented little squares. Recesses. And it makes it incredibly satisfying to manage and move those resources. When a game like this has a lot of complexity around quite a simple like gaming action. Like to make that actual physical action as tactile and as like responsive and give you that feedback gives it a bit of that extra like spice to the game. It makes it really enjoyable to play.
So you know, you've been saying, you know, this is quite a heavy game. You know, it's creeping up there to like getting towards a 4 on BGG, which is so for perspective, like probably Advanced Squad Leader is around there. The starter set is around there, which I know is quite dense. Civilization, the board game, not the new Hex one, but the old one.
Yeah,
that is up there around that sort of thing, and I know that that's complex. And you were saying that, you know, this game takes a fair number of hours, but there's only really a few turns. So where does the time? Why are you spending so much time on it if there's so few turns and there's so few actual choices? But also, where does the complexity come in if essentially all you have is a selection of, you know, a list of things that you can do?
So for me, it's that plurality of choices. Secondly, also, it's a game that, yes, there is a degree of area control within it, but I like the way that we played it, Sam, which is where you and I together would talk about the possible choices that each other could make. And a lot of the time was spent, Pete. And I don't know if this was just because the first time we played it through and we were kind of learning as we were going, but I like the way in which we played it. It didn't feel overly antagonistic. It never felt that like, oh, Sam's running away with it here. We're in the middle of the second round. I'm just going to have to wait here now and watch while I'm just slowly reduced to nothing. There was never really that. I liked the problem of going, oh, well, I want to do that. Oh, hang on, I haven't got the resources here. But because you've got these beautiful, as Sam says, and it looks quite daunting. You've got these scales, these kind of, for the different resources.
Not literally.
Yeah. But it's actually moving cubes across. It's going, well, if I do that, I can spend that resource here, which allows me to do that. And you've got that game plan. Planning ahead, that is where the time, you know, so that's what takes up the time. And it's not antagonistic. Oh, I suppose some people can play it, but Sam was playing a Sparta. He wasn't like kicking me into a hole in his garden or anything like that. We were having this nice kind of conversation back and forth. And there was just enough differences between our respective cultures, not just in terms of the territories we owned, but in terms of the resources we started with, to make it feel as if we weren't just copying each other, if that makes sense, every time.
Yeah. There's the majority of the crux of the game surrounds these things called, like, you've got the sort of general resources, like, as I said, like iron and wood and wheat, and then you've got like this primary resource which is called like prestige, and you need prestige to do anything that is slightly to do with your military. So if you want to move your army or move your galleys, or lay siege to a city, or if you want like the city that you own to go out and gather resources for you, which your army will do for you, you need prestige. And at the start of the game, that's a very limited resource. Like, you start off with literally 2 prestige. So even though the game is really complex, it's always asking you to be thinking about, right, how are you going to get prestige? How are you going to get the stuff that you need to do the stuff that you want? And because there's 11 things to pick from, but it's just like, right, I've not got enough prestige to do that, so therefore I need to collect some resources. Right, how am I going to collect resources? Oh no, that ocean pathway is blocked by Chris's boat, so I can't send my merchant there. I've got to send them somewhere else. Everything has a consequence, and it means that yes, there are moments when you get stuck in a bit of analysis paralysis where you're just like, I don't know what to do. But then there's also moments where you're just fizzing around the table going, right, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go there, I'm going to trade this, I'm going to move that, and then on my next turn I'm going to have enough to do X, Y, and Z. And the game always makes sense in some sort of logical way. Like, as I said, if you want to do something with your military, it takes prestige, and that kind of makes sense. Like, it takes your governance as a ruler to get your armies to do stuff for you. When you lay siege to a polis, yeah, you get some prestige points, but now you've got a population to feed. So now you've got to go and get wheat to feed this population, or else when the turn ends and you've got to start feeding them, you're going to be in trouble. So instead of keeping them as a population, you can turn them into an army and send them off, therefore limiting the need for wheat, later on in the game, everything has this love. It's almost like a Newton's cradle. Like everything has this lovely little like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, where the consequences of what you're doing is always knocking up against each other. And as Kris said, like, again, maybe we were playing it wrong, but it was really enjoyable just as a pair of people who love playing games, and especially games like this, which are quite complex, and like discovering that together and being like, well, you could do that and I could do this and we can move around, and we might battle once or twice. I think we only had one battle, but that was just because I wanted to see what would happen.
Yeah.
But it was just a really nice thing to discover and a really compelling puzzle to share with someone else. And I just thought that first, when the game ended, I thought, as I said, like, I really want to play it again. And like Pete, I think you would just, from a design point of view and from a gameplay point of view, I think you would just love to like pull this apart and just be like, this is so incredibly clever and insightful. And it genuinely feels like something different to other games like this that I've played.
And it's got these really nice touches in there. Not only does it have like a marketplace where the paucity for certain items can increase the cost for them, which I've seen in, you've seen lots of other games.
Of course.
Which is another sliding scale where I'm thinking, oh well, I'm one of these people when I'm in an economics game, I'm not very good at planning too far ahead. Like, I don't have much from reserves. I plan for everything, so I use up every single cube, for want of a better word, that I have to do exactly what I need. But if, say, Sam has, I don't know, I think grapes is something you can get from the market. If Sam has particularly increased the value of grapes by just one cube, that can kind of scupper my entire plan. But rather than getting too cross and frustrated, again, I like thinking, well, there is another solution. It's just it isn't this one yet now. And another thing I really, really love is, say if Sam chose to pass, he hands me a token. Suddenly now, I can carry on if I want to. But everything costs
He can take, Kris can take all the actions he wants to. He can take two of the same action in a row, which you can't do on your normal turn. It sounds like a wonderful thing.
Why isn't everyone doing it? But because when Sam hands me that token, it says that I have to pay one extra resources, or is it a prestige point, Sam? I can't remember.
One extra resource.
For everything I want to do.
Everything that you want to do.
And I never once did I ever carry on. I always I'm going to pass as well. Because that one resource, the way I was planning it, was crucial. And it's just something really lovely. It's like, you can carry on if you want. You think you've got the advantage, but actually I'm just giving you enough of a disadvantage to make you question. And that's why you take a long time. It's not that I'm agonizing waiting for Sam to take his go. It's actually thinking, okay, right, if he does that, then I'll just do this. And hang on, but if he does that, then I will just do this instead. And that will affect me. So I'm thinking just as much as Sam is when he's taking his go, which is something I really love. And those 3 hours, they flew by. They genuinely did.
It's pretty watertight from a design point of view. Like there is, I always appreciate when there's a game that always gives you something to do as a player.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing more frustrating than sitting down and it's just like, well, there's nothing I can do this turn. So, well, I'll just get another wood or something.
Yeah.
Whereas the more we kind of discussed it between us two, Kris would see there and be like, oh, I've got no prestige points, I can't do that. And I would just be like, well, you could do this. And it'll be like, oh, yeah, of course, I've forgotten about that. Yeah, I can do this, and then that'll let me do that, and then this will let me do this. Like, there was always a way. There was always a different path or a different river to go down, metaphorically, in terms of, like, to try and reach the point that you were trying to get to. It's exceedingly good game. And I think that, obviously, like, your mileage might vary in terms of, like, what kind of games that you're interested in.
Oh, sure.
I think you could easily look at some pictures on BGG and immediately know, yeah, this sounds like the game for me, or nope, thank you. But I think if you pick it up, you will not be disappointed. Not at all.
Have any of you heard of the website Taming Gaming? Now, this is a website, Sam, that I think you might come to enjoy in time to come. It's a website that I've been aware of for a while, but I've not really kind of been able to kind of engage with it all that much. It's basically a video game database, but based around family and kind of based around games, not necessarily for kids, but looking at games from a parental point of view. and it's kind of a lot of the reviews and a lot of the content on there is kind of written by parents. So I look at it and I've recommended it to people in the past because kind of adults who perhaps don't play games, but their kids want to play games, and so they don't really know how to kind of manage that process because they're not. I mean, obviously, we understand video games, so we understand kind of the pitfalls, what to look for, what to avoid, where to advise, what's suitable for kids, what's not suitable for kids. But a lot of people aren't kind of au fait with that kind of thing, and so they have this website kind of goes through all that. And I've been aware of it for quite a long time. It's run by a guy called Andy Robertson, who's I think on Twitter is Geek Dad Gamer. I think he runs TamingGaming.com, which is the family video game database. And I thought of it recently because obviously Sam in years to come, you I'm sure will be looking forward to playing games with your little boy. And so what I really, really like about this website is they obviously have kind of reviews, not so much reviews, it's kind of descriptions of games. So they'll talk to you about the content of the game. So they go, obviously, narrative spoilers or anything like that. It's about the content so people can understand it. But they have a section on there called lists. And what's really lovely is they will have lists based on certain themes and topics, which, especially for younger children, is really useful. So they might have things like, let me just think, so I just did make a list. So they'll have things like looking at relationships, so games which will guide a child to be a good neighbour, or looking at loneliness, especially kind of within lockdown, like easing loneliness between generations and how games can do that. And obviously we, as huge fans of the medium, we've known for kind of years that the games aren't just what the Daily Mail would tell you games are. They can be pieces of art. They can bring people together. They can be shooty, fighty, but they are so much more than that. And so the kind of, you can look at ideas of loneliness. There's games on there you look at where it's about teaching children to count, or teach children to read, or just cooking, or and kind of embracing emotions. Now, obviously, it's not just for kids games. Like I checked in the search, like Last of Us is on there. It's obviously highlighting the fact that it's 18 plus, it's not suitable, all this different stuff. But all these games are on there, but they're looked at through that parental point of view. And I'm coming to the point now where my little boy is kind of 3.5. He might start playing games soon. He plays he's got he'll play on the iPad. There's like CBeebies games, and he does play those, and he likes those, and he plays them. They're very simple games, but he will really enjoy playing them. And so, in a fairly short time, he can kind of make a transition to, I'm not saying complex games, but more games outside of simply kind of move a kind of a sprite from one side of a screen to another. And that's where kind of I've been really enjoying seeing those things and be able to plan for the future in terms of things I could look at. I mean, and there are games on there that I only found from this. So a game I've been playing got kind of recommended actually by Andy Robertson on Twitter. It's called Fancade. And we've got many genres, I think, of games on this podcast. Whether it's breakfast games or I think lunch break games is our newest genre, which we will cover at a later date because that's a very, very good genre, I think. But obviously, I think everyone has experienced the idea of toilet games. And I find, I'm not sure if Fancade would like me saying this, but I find because it's a really short, quick and easy
video
game
games.
to play. It's all pixel art. It's very small. Basically, you have a variety of different levels, all which are completely different games. A lot of them are just one touch, so you can move a robot around the screen.
I just get really worried about how much time you spend in the loo.
Well, this is the point. If you wonder, I'm saying this game is very, very quick. So I'm not saying I don't do it for when I'm making a quick trip. But, you sit there. Often you have your phone with you. And you can have a. He eats
a lot of pizza, Sam.
Has Polis got a digital app version of it?
Yeah, I'm not playing kind of side on I'm playing very short games. I mean, there's a microtransaction element to it, but it's not intrusive, and it kind of the microtransaction element kind of comes in. It's about kind of upgrading to a premium version of it, and what it does, it comes in every 3 or 4 kind of game type, because you move up between different games, and each game will have between 5 and 10 levels, and then you'll move on to the next game type, and it'll be 5 and 10 levels. So kind of past every 3 grouping of those, you'll have a thing where within the game, it's a bridge needs to be repaired. You need to wait X amount of time, or press this button to skip. But there's nothing else between that, so it does stop you playing, but it gives you a good amount of play up to that as well. So I mean, that's something that kind of got recommended to me, kind of through this, and I've really been enjoying that. But I just wanted to kind of talk about that concept of looking at games from a different perspective. And because I'm not going to, the kind of games that are being targeted towards like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, they're not going to be games that I'm actively looking at, because I'm not a 3 and 4-year-old child. And they're not kind of games where even as an adult you would typically play, because they're not complex enough for an adult. Obviously, there are plenty of games which are suitable for children, which are still great, but some of these really young kids ones aren't. So it's a really nice kind of environment to be able to explore and understand, and kind of look at it. Looks at games like Flower, and looking at kind of hope within games and what Flower can do, stuff like that. Things like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, all those kind of games, these are on there, and it looks at not just it's a game about this. It looks kind of a bit under the surface, which is something that we do a lot. We don't look at the game just on its kind of core front screen. We look and see that stuff behind it. We look at journey. We look at pretty much anything from that game company and see that it's not just pretty pixels. It's so much more beneath that.
Yeah, and I think the true value of stuff like that is, I know that so there's a games industry trade body called Yuki. They're one of the 2 I think we have in Britain, and they're the biggest one, I would say, here in the UK, and they're very keen. I think, in fact, they might be supporting this endeavour. I think it's called Ask About Games, and essentially the whole idea that Yuki is going with at the moment is, there is misinformation out there about what games are about, simply because they're called games, and therefore, people immediately assume that, they'll be fine for kids. My nephew and niece, who are very young, my nephew especially is well into Grand Theft Auto 5, and he is 11 at the time of recording. So, you
didn't sound so sure, Pete.
I think he's 11 or 12, something like that. Either way, probably shouldn't, according to the certification, be playing, something along those lines. But the thing is that I think a lot of people just think, they're just games, aren't they? Whereas with films, I don't think people have quite the same approach. And equally, I think there's a bunch of monetization things that have been around for a few years now that people really don't understand unless they've actually been in it for a while. You go and see a film, you pay your money, you get your popcorn, you sit down, you watch a thing, and then that's it. With a game now, it's a case of, you pay your money, and then maybe you pay some more money, and then you play for a bit, and then you get advertised something, and maybe you pay a little bit more. And I think that unless you're fully into the space, and this is quite a sort of high barrier to entry hobby at times. I think unless you have somebody who's Jeff's my pal. Jeff knows all about video games. I'll ask him whether or not they should be playing. Whether or not little Jimmy should be playing The Last of Us 2. Unless you've actually got that resource, it can be really difficult and really baffling. So I think things like this are wonderful initiatives, and to break it down into things like, you're interested in photography? These are some games in here. The certification ratings for it. I think that's a brilliant idea.
It's great. And Dan, have you come across a list of recommendations for your child that actually there's a kind of an overlap between a game that you actually wouldn't mind playing? You know how those great kids films are the ones that speak as much to adults as they do to kids, and they're almost happening on different frequencies. There are jokes there that the adults get that the kids don't.
A Toy Story.
Yeah. Or Shrek, I'm thinking of in particular as well. There's probably more recent films, but you get it in lots of Pixar films. Is there a kind of a game on the list where actually you're thinking, my 3-year-old and myself, we could both enjoy that for different reasons?
I think I'm not sure with him at his age, whether or not there is whether there is content that I've seen that I would enjoy in the same way that I would enjoy kind of a Pixar film, because I think some of the Pixar films are absolute masterpieces. That doesn't mean so I wouldn't enjoy playing them, but it would be for a different reason. It would be
that's absolutely fine. Of course,
it would be that joint experience of watching him play a game as opposed to me getting something from that game as a gamer type thing. But yeah, I mean, there are lists on there which is kind of like one type like nurturing like 3 to 6 year olds, and these are obviously going to be simple games. And you can those kind of factor in kind of some of the Lego games and those kind of things as well. So it's not just about a really simple mechanic. Some of them, I mean, you look at the Lego games. To a traditional gamer, yes, those aren't complex mechanics. To someone just learning video games, those are complex mechanics. There's lots of things to be aware of.
I think there's plenty of that you could both enjoy. Like A Short Hike, I've played that, and it is an incredible game. Oh my god, that's superb. And what else is on this list? The Grow Up series, a bit more mechanically complex, but again, that is a game that I've really enjoyed. And Snipper Clips. Yes. Oh, it's going to be so much fun. You're going to have a great time.
Oh yeah, but I'm just looking at kind of
and Donut County's on there as well.
But those games aren't ready for my little boy right now. Is what I mean. Absolutely, some of the games that they'll put in. This
he could play Donut County.
I'll have to look at that.
Oh, honestly, Dan, genuinely,
He could genuinely. All he does is move a hole around and watch things fall into it.
The last levels can be a bit fiddly, but you can play it in one go. And it is sometimes when I don't know what to do, but I want a game. But at the same time, I don't want anything overly complex. There's something quite satisfying about just being in charge of a hole, but just watching things drop into it, and then the hole gets bigger the more stuff that falls into it, and then you eventually swallow up parts of a whole town. And just the disinterested look of these animal humanoids as they're getting swallowed up by this whole oh well, all good things come to an end. It's just really funny.
Frog Detective is on this list as well. Short Hike is also because you just go exploring. You just basically you are going on a short hike. Yeah, there's like this overarching mission that you might be more interested in than he is, but at the end of the day, he can just go and explore his world and chat to a few funny characters. So, yeah, that's great.
Is there like a couch co-op game you can play where one character has really complex controls and the other one has very simple controls, but you're playing together?
Yeah, there is. I was going to recommend it, and then I completely forgot that you don't have a Switch, Dan. Actually, you could get it on the Wii if you still. Do you still have a Wii?
It's another toilet game in itself.
A good example of this, Kris. Is a game called Super Mario Galaxy. Because the main...
I've never heard of that.
Have you not heard of it? It's
the little company that could.
Little company that could. Started out making playing cards.
Mayrio, did you say?
Mayrio.
Mayrio.
Basically, the two-player, as it were, version of it is it's a co-op experience in which one person controls Mario, does the jumping, does all the attacking, figures out where they need to go, solves all the puzzles, does all that sort of stuff. But the game was specifically made with this co-op mode whereby the other person just has the wand and picks up stars on the screen.
I remember that.
And Mario Odyssey has a similar thing with the cat.
Does it?
Yeah, so Mario Odyssey, you can basically one player plays as Mario, does all the stuff, and the other person plays as Cappy. So literally, all they can just sit there with the Joy-Con, flicking it about, like attacking enemies, doing lots of really simple stuff, cool. Whilst the other player plays Mario. It's great.
That sounds great.
Because that for me would be that's the kind of game for a parent to play with their child, isn't it? Almost one where. It's almost like the variable player powers you get in some board games, isn't it? Really.
Well, it's a bit like giving them. It's a bit like what we do with our son, where we give him a card to make him feel like he's playing part of the game, but he's not actually playing part of our game. And I can give him a Joy-Con and he can wangle it around and see that something's happening on the screen that he is doing, and feel like that is something that I'm doing and I'm playing part of the action. So. Oh, that means I can play Super Mario Odyssey again. Oh, that's so good. What exciting times. What good excuses to go on Amazon and buy Super Mario Odyssey again.
That was the 122nd episode of Staying In, with Daniel Frost, Peter Willington, Sam Turner, and myself, Kris Darby. Many thanks to Kosmos for sending us a copy of the delightful Polis, and thank you, Santa, for 1,000-year-old vampire. If you have any gaming recommendations for the parents, or if you just have a better translation of Polis, do get in touch via stayinginpod@gmail.com. If email's not your thing, you can reach us on all social media platforms. Yeah, I'm going to say it, all social media platforms. @StayingInPod is our handle for all of these. Right, I'm off to burn some calories on my smart hopscotch. Till next time, bye.